So, Pat, you're very welcome here and very welcome, and thanks for being willing to do an interview on YouTube for us. We're asking different people in the parish to be interviewed, so it's great to have you, and it's great that you're willing to be interviewed, so you're welcome. And the very first question I'm going to ask you, Pat, is tell us about yourself a little bit, just a little bit about yourself to start with.
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here, Father John, with you in my own parish.
Okay.
We look after the southern end of the parish in Callow and make
Right.
sure that the natives remain friendly and that we can talk to those at the northern end of the parish.
Okay.
We're in a beautiful part of the country, and indeed, as you know, where we live in Callow and Cullinockton, it's magnificent. It really is
Absolutely.
magnificent.
Indeed.
So, who am I? What am I? I'm a 70-year-old, married to Gillian, and we have 4 children. They range in age from 33 years to 42 years. We were blessed recently by having our first grandchild, our son William, who lives just across the lake from us, 800 meters as the crow flies, but it takes about 800 kilometers, 800 meters, I should say. Yeah, it takes about 20 minutes to get over if you walk, but it takes only about 3 minutes in a car. And it's a great pleasure to have him and his wife Colleen, who's from Swinford.
Okay.
The one thing I'd say about our children is, first of all, they're the great joys of our lives. But William and Colleen are from the Swinford, greater Swinford, Killasser area. And James, our second son, third child, he's married also to a Killasser woman. So neither William nor James went too far for their wives. They kept it sort of local. James's wife is Cronley from just up the road, up here. A large family, but a wonderful family. And then Christopher, our youngest, is a man who's now living in Geneva. He qualified as a solicitor also. James is living in Dubai with Lorraine, and William is here in Swinford working with me. And my daughter Katie, our only daughter, the eldest, who is living down in Waterford with her husband, who's a chartered accountant down there. The one thing I'll say about our family is that we don't show much imagination. We are born and bred into the law, but James did show some imagination in that he became a chartered accountant, if being an accountant is imaginative. So that's the family background. I was born, bred and reared in Swinford, went to the National School in Swinford, and then I went to secondary school with the monks in Glenstall, down in Glenstall Abbey, and I spent 6 years down there, very interesting, very useful years, and keep the connection with Glenstall. I remember when we were leaving the school in our 6th year, the then headmaster said that Glenstall is the rock that you can always go back to visit, and I do it, not as regularly as perhaps I might, but whenever I need to. And then I went to Dublin and went to UCD, qualified in 1973 with a law degree from UCD, and then the year afterwards qualified at the age of 21 as a solicitor, and was released on the unfortunate public who had to put up with a 21-year-old who sort of thought he knew something, but in the end of the day was learning more when he qualified than he learned when he was in college. I spent a year in Dublin, then came back to my father's practice in Swinford. He was there since 1937 as a solicitor. His father, before my grandfather, started the practice in Swinford in 1900. And my aunt Moya was also in the practice when I came back. She qualified in 1942. So I have effectively been in Swinford ever since. I spent years in Dublin. So 1976, January 76, I came back and rejoined the community that I was born, bred and reared in, and have been here ever since. There's an interesting coincidence that my grandfather established the practice. He was Pat O'Connor also. Some people get confused when they see the name of the firm as P. O'Connor and Son. It's not me. The P is actually my grandfather. The son was actually my father, and I'm the grandson. But my own son, William, now is the fourth generation sort of in the practice as well. And we sort of thankfully continue to practice thanks to the people of the greater Swinford area, Kilhasser area. All have been extremely loyal to us over the years, and without them we would not be in existence, and we're always entirely grateful to them for that.
So thanks, Pat, thanks for that. I'm going to go to the question of faith now. I know you're a man of faith, you mentioned Glenstad there, and just maybe tell us how much your faith means to you.
Well, I have, as I think everyone has and should understand, a spiritual side to your life and a physical side. And the faith is the rock that sort of sustains my spiritual side, and it gives me a purpose for living. And I don't always live up to the standard that I should, perhaps, but at the same time it is always there for me to go back to and to sustain me. I think it gives me the strength to be able to be what I want to be, to do what I want to be, and also, most importantly of all, to be the kind of person that I would like to be for others, because I think service of others is probably one of the greatest things and the greatest honours that anybody can have. It is the, as I say, the rock that keeps my life together, belief in God and belief in the church. I'm not a holy Joe. I do have different attitudes towards some people who really use religion as a type of, I suppose, I don't want to be too castigating, but superstition, if I put it that way. I think it's so important that people understand the true meaning of God and the true meaning of what God is and what He can do for them, and also the true meaning of what Christ was and is every day in one's life. And that it is important to be able to grab it, mean something to you, and be something for you, so that you always have it to fall back on in good times, in bad times, and in difficult times.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Now the next question then is, and you mentioned it already, you work as a solicitor, so, and I suppose as a in jurisprudence, I suppose, applying the law, which we all go to you for help in that. So maybe you could tell us about that kind of thing, because that's your passion, I suppose, as well.
It is, yeah. It's a vocation and a passion. I love it. That's the first thing I would say. And the greatest pleasure I have is when somebody comes in, not with trouble for them, because I do empathise and I feel it's difficult, but is to be able to help them through whatever trouble that they might have. And most times people come, it's not trouble, it's just help they need in getting transactions in place, doing transactions. But the type of work that I do is generally litigation and dispute resolution. When I started off, it was a lot of litigation, which was, I suppose, adversarial. In other words, you were up against somebody else, and it was a little bit like a shadow boxing match. But nowadays, disputes are generally, and I try to encourage people to mediate so that they themselves can work out through, with the help of a third person, myself or others, a resolution of whatever the difficulties are. Life has changed, as we know, quite an amount. I will be 50 years in practice next year, and I moved from when I came back with my Aunt Moya and my father, where there were two girls called shorthand typists, as they were at the time. They're all secretaries now, or legal executives. It was Patty Coss, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year, and Violet Wills, who's still with us but living in another part of the country. And they had manual typewriters. And one of the biggest problems was trying to source the ribbons for the royal typewriters that they had. There was no such thing as dictating machines. The telephone in Swinford in the office was a wind-up telephone, and our Swinford, or the office number was Swinford 7. Swinford 4 was the doctor, and the new doctor that came to Swinford was Swinford 25. What I'm really getting to is technology has changed so much and so radically in the last sort of 50 years that really somebody coming back from the 1970s looking at what goes on and how offices are worked nowadays wouldn't see or wouldn't know the difference. So we moved from the manual typewriter to the golf ball typewriter to a type of pre-computer type access, and now of course with technology as it is, it's all sort of dealt with on laptops and PCs, which is makes life easier. But then on the other hand, the downside is that everybody expects everything to be done now rather than waiting a little bit for it. And the legal services can be slow. It's not like going in and buying a car. If you see a car in the garage, you can walk out the door with the car. So buying a house, for example, can take time. Dealing with a person's estate where they passed away does take time, and dealing with people's difficulties does take time. But that's what I'm there for. But the greatest satisfaction is having somebody going out the door, shaking your hand and saying, the job is done, thank you. And by and large, 99.9% of people are satisfied.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's good. And that must make you satisfied as well then.
Great satisfaction in it. And now we've moved from, we had, as I said, when I came back to 3 solicitors and 2 staff, we now have 7 solicitors, another one on the way. And we have altogether a complement of 24 staff working in the office. So it's
a big staff.
Over 120 people sort of pulling out of it,
so a big staff.
But it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to work for it. And quite frankly, without the people in the Canasser and within Swinford and within the area around Charlestown, Kiltimagh, where we've always had a tradition, we would not be where we are. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother came from Charlestown, so I suppose that connection. My paternal grandfather was from Swinford, but my mother came from Dublin, so as somebody once said, you had to strengthen the stock to bring somebody down from outside the area. And she produced, from my father, four boys, all of whom are lawyers as well. My 3 brothers, 4 of us are lawyers, 2 of them are judges, and Tom is a consultant and retired.
Oh, very good.
And if that wasn't enough, I am also the coroner for the District of Mayo, so I deal with some unfortunately tragic circumstances and difficult circumstances for people, but again, I try to do it as empathetically and as understanding as possible, so that make life as easy, even though grief is always difficult for everyone, and some people have different ways of dealing with their grief. From a legal perspective, I try to make it as easy and empathise with them as possible, but at the same time it's not always the result that you might get that they would want, and particularly in tragic circumstances. But I'm still around coroner for 33 years, and I'm coroner for the District of Mayo for the last 6 years, so I see that's the other side of the professional life.
Yeah, well, that's good. Thanks for that. You can see you like what you do anyway. So the next question then is, you've talked about your family, you've talked about your faith, you've talked about your work. So I thought I'd throw in a question about hobbies. Maybe you have a favourite hobby, you have something you like to do to relax, and you might like to talk about that.
Well, quite frankly, I don't have enough time to do everything that I would like to do. And I think that's a common complaint. There's so many things I would like to do. The one sport that I really enjoy, I enjoyed playing it, and I now enjoy watching it, is rugby. And all of my children have played it. Well, my daughter didn't, but the 3 boys all did it. And I still would be a big, I suppose, rugby fan, both Ballina Rugby Club, where I had and have still a great connection. I was president of the club, I played with the club. I had the great pleasure of being president of Ballina Rugby Club in 2000 and 2004, I did 2 years of it. most people only do a year, but I got penance for my sins,
Oh,
and
okay.
ended up with 2 years of it. But on St. Stephen's Day every year, they have a game between the President's 15 and the actual senior team, and it's the honour of the President to pick his team. So I picked my 3 sons to be on the President's team. Now,
Okay.
Christopher was young, he was only 17, but I joined them for the last 15 minutes of the game. So I had the
Okay.
pleasure of being able to play rugby with my 3 sons. Now, I was very careful to avoid anybody tackling me, and if I saw somebody coming tackling me, I'd point them in another direction so I wouldn't sort of end up.
Yeah.
Other than that, I've always liked fishing, but I don't have time as much as I would like. My grandfather had a boat on Callow Lake. He got his first boat in 1905, cost £5.
At that time,
My father replaced that boat for him in 1940. It cost £10.
Oh,
And they both fished Callow Lake regularly. And when we were children growing up in the 50s and 60s, we used to go down to Callow Lake with my father. He bought a boat in 1965 and it cost him £25. And I replaced that boat in 1985 for £850. And that boat is still there. I don't fish as much as I do, but I had the great pleasure 2 weeks ago of fulfilling one of my lifetime ambitions. And I suppose you would say I was able to tick another box on the bucket list of catching a salmon. So I caught my first salmon ever a fortnight ago today, down in Ballysadare. So that's another box ticked, you know. And as far as other sort of activities, I mean, I really enjoy watching football. Of course, I have had all the ups and downs of Mayo football. I'm 70 years of age and I've never seen Sam Maguire in Mayo. So I'm hopeful that at some stage before I pass away, I'd be able to tick another box on my bucket list and say Sam came back to Mayo. We couldn't do it this year with Joe Biden telling us that we were going to do it. I watched the hurling yesterday, it was great, and I watched the cycling on the Tour de France.
Very good.
And as far as hobbies now, I suppose I'm slowing down a little bit, but I try to walk. I do about 40 minutes of a walk every morning before I go to work. And at weekends, I will try and do an hour and a half, 2 hour walk to keep me sort of relatively sane anyway. You know.
Good. That's great. Thank you for that. And now I thought maybe a question which you might give a good answer to is, I know you have to give people advice in your job, counsel, advice or whatever. So I thought, well, is there any one piece of advice which you think is really valuable and you would really give to people more than anything else?
I thought about that, and I think the most important thing in life, and the advice that we give to anyone, is to do unto others as you would want others to do unto you.
Very good.
And be yourself. Be yourself. Be content within yourself. Don't be concerned about what other people think or what other people say, even though it can be difficult. But most importantly of all, don't hurt other people, and be nice to them without being foolish. And at the same time, you know, be satisfied at the end of your day, each day, that, well, no, I didn't hurt anybody and I helped somebody out.
That's a very good piece of advice. So Pat, we're coming to the end of the interview, and thanks for doing the interview. And it might give someone else the courage, because I've tried people and some of them wouldn't do an interview or whatever. But if there's anything you'd like to add now, because as you were talking, maybe other things occurred to you, and if there's something you'd like to add before we end it, you're welcome now.
Well, there's a phrase or a saying that I like, and I'd like to share it with others as well. I've done it on a few occasions, few events that I was at, and it goes like this: that when the one great scorer comes to mark against your name, it matters not whether you won or lost, but how you play the game.
That's well said. Yeah,
And I think
that is very
that's
good.
the most important thing of all.
It is. So Pat, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
And it's great to have the interview, and we'll have it, and you'll be able to see it, and everybody will be able to see it on YouTube. So thanks again.
Go mí le mar agus go mé which be or an am sure.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Okay.